All right, everyone. Now, I'm assuming you can all hear me, though I can't hear you. And what I'll ask that you do is raise your hand if you have a question. Tonight's class is really about practice. We've done a lot of theory of tarot in previous classes, and so tonight we're just going to be diving into doing spreads and becoming familiar with interpreting cards. There are basically two, maybe three facets to the process of card reading. And one step towards becoming a good card reader requires that the student basically learn to memorize information. We work with a keyword series, and we also work with a tarot that is astrologically based. So the vocabulary we use comes from a combination of keywords, from the astrological vocabulary, but also from the symbolism of the images themselves. This is a very nuanced process doing card readings. There are so many different levels of interpretation that can take place. But by being able to associate meanings, symbols, ideas, and vocabulary with each of the cards is the starting point. The second point is becoming familiar with different tarot card spreads. And the spreads are basically the ritual that we practice. Ritual serves the purpose of being able to dial our consciousness into the information being sought. The laying out of the cards, the process of shuffling and cutting and laying the cards out becomes a ritual. And ritual dials our consciousness into the inner plane, which is where we're seeking to contact information and bring it down to our conscious mind. A good reader has to be able to do both processes, to tap into the information and bring it back for the conscious mind to interpret. Now, the process that takes place is psychokinesis, or the mind moving matter. The cards are being shuffled and arranged into patterns by which we can derive meaning according to the questions. So those of you who have tuned in through Church of Light TV, the handouts for tonight's class are available there. And there's basically 5 sheets that we're going to be using, not only tonight, but in a couple of weeks when we start back again with the series of tarot card readings. The top sheet is our tarot correspondences, affectionately known as the tarot cheat sheet. Here we have 78 sets of keywords for each of the 78 cards. And this is something which is, once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy to follow. Across the top row, we have major arcanums 1 through 16, and they continue down on the 2 right-hand columns. Let's go over to the Church of Light .tv website, go to tonight's class, and download the handouts. So the first handout is the tarot cheat sheet, and we've got the major arcanum across the top and down the right-hand side. On the left-hand side, you can see scepters, cups, coins, and swords. All of the rest of the cards, the minor arcanum and the court arcanum, fall under these 4 suits. So we have listed here, following along with the major arcanum across the top, we have the aces through 10s of each of the minor arcanum, and then we have the king, queen, youth, and horseman for each of the minor arcanum. So that's how this top sheet is red. Then, according to level of complexity, I have the 3 spreads which I use. For those of you who own the Sacred Tarot, there are probably 9 or more different spreads in there. And over the 40-some-odd years I've worked with that book, I personally have only found 3 to be useful for me in my readings. Now, there are other people who like some of the larger, more complex spreads, but I'm a firm believer that less is more. I get more information using fewer cards. So the smallest spread which I work with, which I will show to the camera here, is called the yes or no spread, which is basically 5 cards laid in a row from right to left. We've done this spread in class before, but tonight we'll do some samples of that. And it's a very simple spread for getting precisely those answers, yes, no, or maybe. The second sheet is called the Magic 7 or the Lucky 7 spread. And this has become suddenly more complex by 2 cards. We're now working with a 7-card spread. And this is used for questions that may not be as specific, requiring a yes or no answer, but perhaps when we want to ask what surrounds a situation, where we want to pull in a wealth of information on a topic. So this is broken down into 2 trines, one pointing up, the other down. One gives us the past, present, and future of the matter. Then with the lower trine gives us the individual's ability to control, forces in the environment affecting the question, forces that are in opposition to the matter inquired about, and then you get the outcome with the 7th card. So this gives overall good general information. The most complex spread that I teach is a 12-card spread, which is called the Horoscope spread. And the reason this is complex is that in the way Zane designed this spread, the cards are laid down in one pattern and picked up in another. Once you have done this frequently enough to just master the process of laying out and picking up the cards, where it becomes second nature, where you go on autopilot when you do that, it becomes far less complicated, and any competent astrologer can work well with this spread because it's based on the 12 houses of a horoscope. Now, when I do a reading professionally, I conduct my readings in the opposite order, in that I always start off with the most complex spread first, and that is the 12-card horoscope spread. And I do that as what is called a cold reading. And this is when you sit down with a client and you don't receive any information from them. It's actually a great way to initiate the process of doing a reading, because what I've experienced is that it basically inspires the querent's confidence in the reader. The horoscope spread is, again, it falls into the category of what surrounds this person. When I start off with this as a cold reading, I always tell the querent or the client that I'm going to be looking at the next 12 months. So I'm looking at a year time span. And whenever we do spreads, one of the things we want to set up in our mental state is not only the question being asked, but the time frame. Because what we're doing in this process of divination is we're extending our consciousness to the inner plane. We're tapping into the lifeline of an individual. And it's much like doing field work in botany. When you go out into the field with a grid and you toss that out into the field and you count how many dandelions and how many chicory plants fall within your grid. We're doing the same thing when we're doing a reading, is we're tossing this grid out there onto somebody's timeline. And if you set up the parameters of what you want to be the beginning, middle, and ending dates of this, it helps to narrow the information. Again, though, this falls into one of the categories that might be described as imponderables when we start doing psychic work, because it varies from person to person, and oftentimes it's like butting into the middle of a movie. There are things that have already happened at the beginning of the movie where the plot is unfolding during the course of the period that we've come into the movie, and then there are things that happen beyond the end of that movie. And so in a cold reading, in a general reading like this, you're getting bits and pieces of what's happening along the individual's timeline. One of the experiences I have when I do that first without asking the individual for their questions is a common response after doing the first reading is, well, you've actually touched on the majority of my questions. And what that does is it allows you to enter into a rapport with the person you're reading, because you've already immediately addressed the things that they've come in to inquire about. After I've done a general reading, then I open up the session to asking questions so that the client can specifically address the issues that have brought them there to you. And those questions are then laid out in one of the two other simpler patterns, which we've already looked at, the yes or no spread or the 7-card spread. So I used to use some of the larger spreads in Zane's book, the Life spread, which I think has 52 cards, and the Wish spread, which I may have 17 cards, and they're just unwieldy, I find. I don't find they give clearer information by having more cards. And so I teach from a much simpler method. The mood of the client or the querent can also impact the reading. If somebody's sitting there, that they're just there to test you, it's not going to set up a flow between querent and reader that is always harmonious. If somebody's there because their wife sent them there and insisted they went, again, it may not be the most harmonious flow because it's being forced rather than coming naturally. And they're in divination. The process of receptivity is a very important. We're working with both an active and a receptive process. It's electromagnetic. The electric side of this is when I do the cold reading, I am asking a question, which is, what surrounds Laura for the next 12 months? So there is a question. I develop a strong desire to know through rhythmic breathing and the process of shuffling and cutting the cards. I go through my ritual, which dials my consciousness in to tune into you and your lifeline, contact that information, and bring it back through the spread. Now, when I've moved beyond that first reading, then what's happening is oftentimes the querent is telling their story. They may want to give you background information on something, which can be helpful. It depends on the level of verbosity of the client. Sometimes people are there because they have a need to talk, and that is part of the counseling process for them. There's other times where people really want to get the information from you. and they may be quick or concise in their questions. As you probably know, having done this, Laura, that you'll encounter all types of people, some of who can just laser focus in on what it is they want to know. Others have to describe the situation, and you may assist them in coming up with a question. But the more you're able to narrow and simplify the question, it's easier for the acrobat to extend into higher consciousness, grab that, and bring it back to the conscious mind. Sometimes people wait till the last 2 minutes of their time to ask their really important question. Other times people can get to it right away, but it's part of the human process and the counseling process. My sessions are based on a time allotment. And so what one can ask during that time allotment is what transpires in the session. I usually do 45-minute sessions. The reason for that is I need a break between clients. Because of the work I do, I have a greater tendency to attract people in states of trauma, where they're coming to me with the most outlandish questions and or life crises. So the people are oftentimes in a very profound emotional state, and that can be exhausting to work with. And so you have to have time to clear out. People are in really big life crises, and then there is maybe 10% of the time in my work, I don't know what it's like for other readers, but in my work, 10% of the time might be persons who just really want an understanding of what's going on. So that's the way I conduct a session. Well, go ahead and ask your questions, David.
All right, I was wondering how closely linked is the Kabbalah and the Tarot? And I was also wondering, did he happen to publish the book on the Kabbalah? And I don't know if this one was appropriate, if you could answer it or not, but I was wondering if the Kabbalah is studied in the order of the Sphinx.
All right. As far as I know, there is a great link between Kabbalah and the Tarot, though it's not necessarily that linked in the Brotherhood of Light tradition. There are authors in the Kabbalistic tradition that have also linked with the Tarot. Eliphas Levi, Paul Foster Case, A.E. Waite often wrote from the Kabbalistic. Now, the Brotherhood of Light Tarot, although it does include on the major arcanum the Hebrew alphabet, there isn't a lot of information on the Kabbalah. Zane did not write on the Kabbalah other than for 2 chapters in the beginning of the Sacred Tarot, where he just briefly touches on the theory of what the Kabbalah is. So there are actually other authors out there that have perhaps more revealing information on the links between the Kabbalah and the Tarot. Zane's focus was more as a naturalist and as an astrologer, and that comes across in his in what I call the Brotherhood of Light Tarot, which is really an astrologically based tarot, and each of the divisions of the cards, the 22 majors, correspond not only to the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, but they correspond to the 22, the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 10 planets. The 36 minors correspond to the 36 decanates of astrology. The 12 court arcana correspond to both the 12 houses and 12 personality types. and the 410s correspond to the 4 seasons. So his approach was more a synthesis of the universe from the astrological perspective. And so the Kabbalistic writings in the Brotherhood of Light, even though the background, one of Zane's predecessors, Max Theon, was a Polish Jew and strongly influenced by Kabbalistic theory and practice. That did not come down all that directly through the sacred tarot. But anyone who studies Kabbalah can also study the sacred tarot and make those links. Did I get all of your questions, David?
Wondering, in the order of Sphinx, is Kabbalah studied a little bit more in depth?
It is by some individuals, but not necessarily by the group as a whole. So there are individuals in the order who have strong personal interest in the Kabbalah and pursue that with other like-minded members. Let's go through the process of doing a spread. All right. Of the three of you present, does anyone want a general reading?
Looking at each other.
What we're going to do is a sample of the horoscope spread. And Paul is our guinea pig. He's going to be our sample. And basically, Paul, the question I'm asking is, what surrounds you for the next 12 months? What are the key events coming up? The process, for those of you who aren't entirely familiar, is we come up with the question, we focus on what the question is. We've decided the pattern in which we want the cards to fall. In this case, it's the 12-card horoscope spread. And now the process is of shuffling, using the left hand, cutting the cards into 3 piles, rearranging them in any format, because we want the cards to be reversed and right side up. And then we do that same pattern 3 times while concentrating on the question. It's usually during this portion that I'm also doing my rhythmic breathing in order to get electrified and be able to extend my consciousness from the cerebral to the inner plane to contact the information, bring it back in through the process of laying out the cards. Now, when we do a horoscope spread, we first lay the cards out in quadrants. And this was based on what you'll recognize as the 4 angular houses. 1, 10, 7, 4. Then what we do is we're now placing them on the cadent houses, which are 12, 9, 6, and 3. And then we fill in the empty spots, the succedent houses, 11, 8, 5, and 2. So that's how the cards are laid out. And again, the process of laying these out and picking them up is really complicated until you learn your 12 houses and learn the divisions of the triplicities, the quadruplicities. So when we go to pick them up, we always start with this card, which is the first house. And we pick the cards up in what are called trinities or trines. We start with the Trinity of Life, and the Trinity of Life are houses number 1, 5, and 9, and these correspond to the fire signs. They have to do with the things that make us feel alive in this world, whether it's our physical body itself and our personal interest, our love affairs and passions and creativity, or our adventures and our philosophies, the ninth house. So the first house for me oftentimes will indicate what may be a personal focus of the querent at that time. So it specifically has to do with their personal interest and or physical matters. In the case of the first card, this is the Nine of Swords reversed. In the Brotherhood of Light card system, cards which are right side up represent energies that are moving forward, and cards that are reversed indicate lessened energy. But the meaning of the card does not change all that dramatically. So if we go to our cheat sheet and we go across to number 9 and we go down to swords, it's interpreted as a quarrel resulting in enmity, which sounds really serious. Now, the key words don't always reflect the nuances, but they're a starting point for us. Swords generally indicate strife of some type, and the 9 has to do with one's friendships. So this could be a time, Paul, where you may find yourself being preoccupied by what could be a misunderstanding that happens with a friend, or there could be a friend who's in trouble that gets your attention during this period of time. If we interpret this from the perspective purely of the physical body, the swords oftentimes bring in things that may have to do with things such as joint issues, sprains, and strains. So I would look at this and say that, this is a year where you may have to be careful of not overdoing it or being excessive in any way, or you're going to be spending some time in recuperation. Now we move to the 5th house, which has to do with one's love, romance, one's children, and one's entertainment. This card is another 9. In this case, it is Arcana 9, which is known as the Sage. And the imagery of this is an old man who is holding a staff in one hand and a lamp in the other hand. And he's wearing a square cloak, and his light is coming out from under the cloak. So it's a card that represents insight, enlightenment. It's governed by Aquarius, and the influences here are of friendship. So your entertainment this year may come through friends, or this may be a year where you find yourself getting on what may seem like a more friendly platform with your daughter, or you may find yourself even in a more of a mentorship platform with either your daughter or your grandson. So it implies, gaining a lot of insight and wisdom in both of those areas. And if we go to the 9th house of religion, philosophy, the higher mind, here we have the Youth of Scepters, which is interpreted as a man of Sagittarius nature. Well, certainly anybody who works in the Zane system is tapping in constantly to a Sagittarian mentor and or philosophy. But this can also have to do with the fact that this is a year where you've started teaching again. So you could find vitality or energy through publicly expressed opinions, being in the classroom, and or the movement that goes towards publishing and or the curriculum program. Basically having a strong focus on educational practices. But this is also a card that brings travel, where you may have more adventure, and already you've spent in recent time, a month in California, and we'll be doing that again soon, and there may be other travels that come up more frequently for you during the year. Now we move to the Trinity of Wealth, which is the second house of income, personal wealth, the sixth house of earning and of employment and or service, and the 10th house of career, honor, and reputation. In the second house, we have the Queen of Coins, which generally would be interpreted as a woman of Libra temperament. So I don't know if this is a year where you may be shopping around for a new bookkeeper or CPA or financial advisor or estate planner or something of that nature. But there could be a woman who takes on a significant role in terms of the way in which you deal with finances this year. Or this could also represent the individual's attitude towards money. Queen of Coins, of course, has to do with money, but being in a place of taking a very carefully balanced approach to finance. And this could just be, whether it's on a personal basis, poring over your profit and loss statements, or whether it's in an administrative role with the church of looking constantly at the checks and balances there. In terms of the workplace, we have the Four of Cups, which shows an increase in the family. So, either one of those cats that's crawling around outside and staring in the front window here is going to move in, or it may be the time where there may be additional employees or volunteers that come into the workplace. The inner meanings of this has to do with resourcefulness. And the sixth house is also one of the houses that pertains to health and healing practices. And the Four of Cups can also be a time of tapping into healing energy, whether this is shopping around for a primary care physician, finding a acupuncturist or massage therapist or chiropractor that works for you. But basically finding the persons who are your healers. 10th house of career, we have Arcanum 7 reversed. This is called the Conqueror, sometimes called the Chariot. And this is a man who is standing in a chariot being pulled forward by a light sphinx and a dark sphinx, representing periods of both fortune and adversity. So this is a card that tends to represent victory over obstacles, victories over trials and tribulations. It's a card which has to do with philosophy, with publishing, with education, and all of the things that would be sort of tied in with the work that you do with the Church of Light. So it looks like it's a time where you'll be moving forward with the good times and the bad times, and feeling victorious or accomplished in the goals that you set out for yourself.
And when a major is reversed?
Again, it's lessened energy. You know, there may be successes gained. They may not be as huge as one might like, but will still be measured with a feeling of success. All right, we've moved from the Trinity of Wealth, which shows a balanced approach towards finance, scoping out a sense of family within the workplace, and victory in one's goals or objectives. Now we're looking at the Trinity of Association, which is 3rd, 7th, and 11th house. 3rd house we interpret as being brothers and sisters, one's neighbors, but it also has to do with one's mental focus and private thoughts. With the 6 of Swords here, quite possibly this is reversed and the card appears like that. This could possibly be a year where you may not see your brother as frequently as you have in the past, or it could possibly be a year where you may find a sibling going through a difficult period and being in contact with them as they deal with their own personal crises of some kind. In terms of mental attitude, the 6 of Swords represents being in conflict, being distracted. It can sometimes be interpreted as dissipation. So it may be a year where you, find a lot of different things competing for your attention, and where you may, struggle to be able to maintain a focus on the things that you really want to be focused on. 4 of Swords is in the 7th house, which has to do with partnerships, spousal relationships, or dealings with the public. The 4 of Swords, which looks like that, generally is interpreted as remorse for past actions. So, hopefully there's nothing lurking around from the past you get punished for. But it can also represent a time where you could find your spouse going through some challenges, or just trying to bring things to resolution in some ways. What I like about the 4 of Swords is that determination, which means that the problems that exist can be surmounted. That one just slugs away at them until there's accomplishment that takes place.
Soldiering on, sort of?
Yeah, soldiering on. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes I just describe it as clinging to the life raft. There are times in our lives where we thrive. There are periods where we strive, and there's other times where all we do is survive.
Do you usually refer to the inner meaning when the card's right side up more than when
No, I refer to the inner meaning when the outer meaning isn't giving me the ideas that I need.
Uh-huh.
So let's go to the House of Friendships, which looks like a good area for you this year, Paul. The 11th house pertains to groups, clubs, organizations, social circles, and your acquaintances. And here we have Arcanum 21, which is the Adept. And this would represent being able to feel successful in friendship, being able to spend time this year with people who actually energize you to be around them, where you feel more vital through your social contacts. So we move from the Trinity of Association, being siblings, spouse, friends, to the trinity of psychism, which is 4, 8, and 12. Fourth house we generally think of as home, family, property, real estate, land, but it's also the psychic environment around the home. The 8th house is definitely death in the spirit world. The 12th house can be our own inner explorations, as well as the things that haunt or trouble us. So in terms of the 4th house, we have the 10 of scepters here, which is a new invention or discovery. I think you've been in your home already 2 years now, so it's 1 year. Oh, okay. So still kind of a new invention, or you're still discovering things, I'm sure. But to me, the 10 of scepters also has to do with technology, and this may be a year where you know, I don't know if you're going to be rewiring your house or putting in a, new cable or a security system or wireless system or, computers in every room. So it may be, or, a wireless music system that you can adjust, but it will sort of be a year where the house may expand in its technology. 5 of coins is in the 8th house, which has to do with inheritance, legacies, other people's money. And I don't think you have any living relatives to inherit from, but I don't know. This could even be just your own investments or finances that could turn out to yield dividends this year, or where you may see an uptrend in the market or in pension or retirement funds. Or you may get a moderate cost of living increase through Social Security. But there's going to be some increase that happens for you along financial lines. Or if this represents the realm of fiduciary responsibility, who knows? It could turn out to be a good donation year for the Church of Light, where there may be some excessive generosity that's shown. And lastly, the 12th house of one's inner space. The last card is Arcanum 2, Veiled Ices reversed, in the 12th house. And the 12th house represents our sense of solitude, quiet. And Veiled Ices has to do with delving into the mysteries. So this may be a year where you seek out more retreat time or quiet time for yourself, or there may be, certain areas of science or philosophy that grab your attention, where you're delving into the mysteries and looking at the interrelationships of inner plane and outer plane facts. Could be a year where your dream life may become more pronounced or symbolic. So that's a horoscope spread. I like to go back and summarize, and I look for patterns. First thing I look for is major arcanum, because they show power in a spread. We have 4 major arcanum. We have Arcanum 9, 7, 21, and 2. So they all show areas that are going to be of key or more pronounced emphasis, being relationship with children and grandchildren, and or the celebratory part of your life, things having to do with your goals and objectives, your friendships, and your inner life are going to be areas of primary focus this year. If we look for court arcanum to see personalities that may impact you, along the lines of teaching or publishing or philosophically, there could be a man of Sagittarius temperament. In the realm of finance, a woman of Libra temperament. If we look in terms of suits, swords does show up here. We have 1, 2, three swords that are revealing themselves, which show some degree of strife, but this may be persons around you that may be struggling, or a year where you could find the persons closest to you having their own inner conflicts. If we look at scepters, we have two scepters, which have to do with business and one's enthusiasms. And the areas where you may feel some excitement could be tied into your home and travel, the time away from home. Cups, we have only one, which is the Four of Cups. And with coins, we have two, the Queen of Coins and the Five of Coins, which both fall in the money houses of the chart, which show positively for greater cash flow. If we look numerically, what is being repeated here are 2 4s, which is the number of realization. And the 4s have to do with things coming into a more concrete form, impacting you in the realm of work or employees and in partnerships. The only other number repeated is 9, Arcanum 9 and the 9 of Swords, which can place a emphasis on what may be more you're taking on a role as mentor, whether it's towards students or towards family members. So that's how we go about summarizing this. Any questions out there from the peanut gallery?
Renee.
Hi, Renee.
I was just curious, do you always turn your cards over in the exact same pattern?
I do, from top to bottom. That's one of the patterns. And then I turn them over according to the trines, life, wealth, association, and psychism.
Just curious, do you always start in the second house in the trine of power?
Yes. In the Trinity of Wealth, we start with the second house, but in the beginning of the whole reading, I started with the first house.
Yeah.
Each reader develops their own pattern, their own method, their own way of doing things, which it's almost a part of you that goes on to autopilot when you go to do the reading. Consciousness goes to wherever the attention is held. And we want the process of shuffling and laying out and picking up the cards to become so automatic that our consciousness is not on those efforts, but it's on the interpretation of the symbols and the ideas coming through the spread. So each reader may develop their own pattern over time, and you might want to go in and reread how Zane describes laying the cards out in Course 6. And again, just because he gives a particular pattern, you may not want to follow it. You might want to just lay your cards out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and read them that way. It's purely, the individual can come up with their own method, but the thing is you don't want your attention to be going to the method, you want your attention to go to the interpretive process. Doing it the same way every time. Whatever your method is, repeat your method.
And I don't see on our cheat sheet where there's a singular key word for each number.
Go to the top where the major arcanum is. Mm-hmm. Go up to Arcanum 4.
Yeah.
4.
Realization.
Oh, okay, so every time...
So all of the fours will be some
I
form of realization.
Okay, thank you.
And it's just whether that realization is filtering through the element of earth, whether it's filtering through the element of water, through air, through fire. So that's how the minors all relate back to the
Okay,
majors. There is
I get it.
a relationship, numerical relationship between the majors and the minors.
Thank you.
So, since you're next in order, Laura, is there a question you'd like to ask that you feel comfortable presenting before the group?
I have to, now I'm on the.
You don't have to
hot
be,
seat
Michelle. Do you want to
think
be in
of
the
a
hot seat?
question.
Any brave soul would like to ask a question?
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
This is Alice Marie.
Hi, Alice Marie.
My question has to do with a project that I'm working on, and it is a writing project, and I'd like to know if I am going in the right direction.
Okay. We could either do a yes or no, specifically asking, is Alice Marie going in the right direction? Or we could do the 7-card spread and inquire what surrounds Alice Marie's writing project and see what kind of, I'd be more inclined to do that, to see.
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Do you have a working title for your project?
A Tale of Two Minds.
All right. We'll see what surrounds a tale of two minds. So, we've come up with the question, the spread. We've determined is the 7-card spread. I've begun the process of shuffling, cutting, using the left hand to rearrange, and repeating that 3 times. I then deal the cards out from the top of the deck, starting with card number 1, which represents the past of the matter. This is the top of the upper trine. Card number 2, which is the present of the matter. And card number 3, these combine to form the trine as above. So below is the individual's ability to control the matter, factors in the environment that are favorable to the question, the factors in the environment that are opposing the matter, and the outcome. And we'll turn these over one at a time. For the past of the matter, we have Arcanum 4, which is the sovereign, or also known as the emperor in other decks. This is a man who is seated on a cubic throne, holds a scepter. There's a cat emblazoned on the side of that throne. And we generally read this card as being a card of realization. And it's a realization that is more of a temporal or physical nature. So the cat on the side shows a sense of vigilance to interplane influences. But the sovereign himself is an individual who makes things manifest physically. So in this tale of two minds, you could find yourself in some ways even skirting between what may be inner plane, outer plane realities, or touching upon things that may fall into the category of the highly symbolic. Being the past of the matter and being realization, I would guess from this that you've already put a good deal of time, energy, effort into your project, so that it's something that's probably well underway. Now the next card which comes up is the 4 of Scepters. This is generally interpreted as a legacy. Now a legacy can of course be a direct inheritance from someone, but it's not always in the form of an estate or wealth. Legacy can also be certain ideas, skills, talents, understandings that are passed on to us by others. So in the present, it's a time where you're going to be really working on congealing the concepts that you want others to gain from this project. That's followed by the Six of Scepters, reversed. And the Six of Scepters has to do with business that might deal with music, art, or drama. Is your writing project by any chance a screenplay or...
Memoir.
Well, memoirs can certainly be one's legacy, because the memoir becomes the legacy of what you leave for others. The Six of Scepters could be you're trying to craft this into what may seem like a very creative, interesting format or formula, so that there's also something about it that can capture the artistic imagination of other people. And that's the future of the matter. So moving forward on this, you may be going between the legacy, the information, or the story you want to tell, and then also trying to figure out how to make the story more artistic in some ways. The important thing here is your ability to control the matter, which is showing up as Arcanum 17, or the Star. And this is the card of truth, hope, and faith. So you may find that the guiding factor in the writing process for you is just sort of telling the truth and being able to move forward in your writing with a sense of hope and faith, having a vision of what the outcome is. Part of this, if we even look at the image, there is this butterfly, which is the process of metamorphoses, the flower representing new life. There's a star overhead with a light and dark trine representing as above, so below. So in the process, part of the story, if it's your own personal memoir or if you're writing a memoir of someone else, it might be also looking at what the events or experiences that were transformative somehow, that what's really interesting in the story might be the process of change or transformation or metamorphoses that happen in the individual's life that you're writing about. In terms of the environment, we have the King of Swords, which is a man of Taurus temperament. This is somebody who could be down to earth, might be somewhat materially minded. And I don't know if this is going to be the actual physical environment in which you do your writing, which the King of Swords can represent there being some luxury tied in with that, or comfort, or writing in a beautiful place or environment. Or this could be a man that may be in your life or surroundings that provides some stability or support while you're able to go through the creative process of writing. The opposition to the matter is the Eight of Coins reversed. This is normally read as a costly lawsuit. Depending on whose memoirs you're writing, you might have to be careful if there's any deep, dark secrets mentioned there. But this card, I find it less often represents a lawsuit as it does just financial concerns. And so somewhere in this process, I don't know if this is tied in with what might be receiving an advance from a publisher, or whether it's trying to decide whether or not to self-publish, or what the financial considerations might be tied in with the publishing process. So there's going to be something that comes up along monetary lines that could be distracting to you, Alice Marie. Nevertheless, I think you could come up with a seller, because the outcome is the Six of Coins. Normally it's read as a social event, and of course once one is published, the social events that accompany that are oftentimes in the form of book signings and or things such as talk show presentations or other such things. But I would say, in summarizing this, there are two suits that are repeated: coins and scepters. Scepters have to do with enterprise, enthusiasm, energy, and passing on a legacy to others. The coins have to do with the finances, being in some ways what may be disappointed by a publisher's advance or deal memo or offer, but the outcome is the work itself can bring a profit to you. It looks like there's either a male companion or an environment that will support you in the process, and that you're going to feel like there's both realizations and a truth-telling in this process, wherein you may find the memoirs could be inspirational or insightful to others. And the numbers that are repeated here, we have 4, Arcanum 4, and the 4 of Scepters, which is realization. We have 2 sixes, which is the 6 of Scepters and the 6 of Coins, which has to do with choices, discernment, and the creative side of the writing process, knowing that pleasure attracts and pain repels, and that the more pleasurable one can make their writing, whether it's in the stories told or through the actual writing style itself, the greater the audience one can capture. Any feedback or response? Okay, good. Terrific.
You touched on many different areas of concern.
Excellent.
And it all made sense to me.
Perfect. Well, that's what a reading's supposed to do.
Where you're talking about being careful about lawsuit type stuff, fidelity is the key word for, and that might be a guiding theme, either staying true to a contract or to what's being represented in the writing.
Being true to one's mission in the writing, or to one's voice in the writing.
Yeah, right. Just the fidelity seems like a guiding word to keep one out of hot water there.
Yeah. All right, we've got 10 minutes left in class. Does anybody want to venture a yes or no question? A quickie yes or no? Yes. Will I be able to have my vacation at the end of this month? Very good. Thank you, Keith. That can be answered with a yes or no. All right. Yes or no, 5 cards from right to left. I've shuffled and cut the cards, asking the question, will Keith Benjamin be able to have his vacation at the end of this month? In this spread, in all other spreads, I turn the cards over one at a time. But with the yes or no spread, I turn them all over to first discover whether it's saying yes or no. So I can now disappoint you by saying no. Now what we want to do, okay, you're not surprised. What we want to do is go back and try and understand why it's saying no. And we look at the cards individually. The first card represents the distant past, and it's the Enchantress, or Arcanum 11, but it's reversed. So cards that are reversed say no. And when reading the yes or no spread, all of the cards have 1 point. If they're right side up, it's for yes. Reversed, it's no. The exception is the center card, which has 2 points. So the past of the matter, the Arcanum 11 could show something that's kind of a dream or a wish or something you're looking forward to, or something that's been, a carrot dangled on the end of the stick. So it's been promised, but not necessarily delivered. The second card is the Queen of Cups reversed, which represents a man of Scorpio nature. This is the recent past, and I don't know if this represents a facet of you. The key word is I desire, so this could be your innermost desires or passion to have a vacation, or this could represent a supervisor or scheduler or someone in human resources that might have a say in when you do or don't get your vacation. And if they're at all cranky or vindictive, they could be standing in your way. That's followed by the Two of Scepters right side up in the center, which is 2 points for yes. And that would show in the present that you certainly may be deserving of a vacation, and you may qualify on all levels for that to be granted. The future looks favorable, but it just doesn't look favorable in terms of getting it at the end of this month. The next card is the Five of Cups, which can be an abundance of love. So this might be having the opportunity to have the vacation with a spouse or family member or loved ones, or being able to maybe possibly return to the mainland and visit family on vacation. And the outcome, the last card, is the Five of Scepters reversed, which is good fortune in business. So by being somewhat flexible at this time with whomever this man is that may be involved with the scheduling, it looks like there could be some greater perk that comes to you in the future, whether it's getting an extra day added on, or somebody being willing to work around your schedule in the future. So I would say no, you're not getting it at the end of this month, but that you will get it this year. And it may turn out to happen at a time that might seem even more valued or opportune for you when it actually transpires. So, summary. The only repetition here are 2 5s, which are the number of good fortune. So I think even if it is delayed, you get something better as an end result. And we have 2 scepters, the 2 of Scepters and the 5 of Scepters, which might indicate that there are certain business demands or what might be a period of heightened activity in your workplace right now that could prevent this from being the time that you go. And then, of course, 2 cups, the Queen of Cups and the 5 of Cups. So there's definitely some emotion around this, both your desires for a vacation and the joy that it's ultimately going to bring you. Any feedback?
I noticed in that if one of the cards had been right side up, we would have had a tie.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, so if you read it that way.
As it's undecided, it's up in the air, it can go either way. But in this case, it was definitely a no, but not unpleasant in any way. That he may not get it on schedule, but could turn out
better in the long haul.
Better in the long haul, yes.
I've got a question. Margie in New Mexico. After the cards are laid out, I've noticed that he turns the cards over from top to bottom instead of just over, reversing the natural layout of the spread. Is there a reason for this?
Only that's the way I learned how to do it. That's how Zane describes doing a spread. So again, the important thing is, whatever method you lay out your cards, you do it consistently, because that's how the unconscious mind is telling the conscious mind it wants to receive the information. If your habit in cards is just turning it from side to side, then you continue with that habit, and you always do it that way.
It's like you make an agreement with your cards.
Exactly. With your cards, with your subconscious mind, you're making an agreement. And it's basically, it is ritual, and when it allows you to go on autopilot when you're doing that. So hopefully this has been insightful for everyone, just the process of how all of this works. And in a few weeks, we'll be doing more of this. And I will say
Margie says
good night to all.
Excellent class. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.